Yeah, so basically, Brother Hashim, I was listening to the stream a while ago. You mentioned forced marriage in Hinduism.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of my old friend, came up with the same question when the concept of concubine in Islam and slave of prisoner war,
Prisoners of war.
like, yeah, prisoners of war. So how as a Muslim, like, we can, convince the idea of slavery and marrying the slaves, and all that was my basic question.
Yeah, this question is asked several times, but the problem with this question is that you are assuming that a prisoner of war should be treated same as a wife. You see, in the case of this forced marriage, which we talked about here, is about a
Yeah.
wife. Like you should give the right of the wife to it, whereas a concubinage is something which is prevalent in all cultures, including in Judaism as well. Like if you look at the Old Testament and so on, in
Yeah,
Christianity, Judaism, they all believe in the Bible, isn't it? So,
of
with
course.
regards to, by the way, a concubine, sorry, a prisoner of war who's been taken is not a free person; he's a prisoner of war. So we cannot just take
Yes.
some free person, abduct them,
Uh-huh.
and then marry them. No. So these
Yeah.
are actually, during the war times, many times the women will accompany the men. Yeah, I'm talking
Yeah.
about the ones
Yeah.
who are coming to war and have a fight with the Muslims. They would accompany,
Yeah.
and they would be well dressed. You know why they will be well
Of,
Yeah.
dressed?
yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
was a norm in that time, whether the war is
Uh-huh.
between Muslim and non-Muslim, or non-Muslim and non-Muslim. It was a
Yes.
norm at that time that whoever wins will actually take the plunder, which includes the prisoners
Uh-huh.
of war as a part, as
Yeah.
as a booty. But the thing is, it doesn't mean that the soldier. There's actually rules in all
Uh-huh.
of this. It doesn't mean that the soldier
Yeah.
can just pick any woman that they have captured and rape her. No,
Mm-hmm.
there's actually
Yeah.
an entire process how this the prisoners of war are distributed amongst the Muslims, and that too, once
Uh-huh.
it's been acquired by the Muslim, it's been granted
Mm-hmm.
by the ruler, the Caliph at that
Uh-huh.
time. Then
Okay.
they cannot even slap the
Uh-huh.
the prisoner of war, or I don't want to
Slave.
use the term slave, because the
Yeah.
term slave
Okay.
has a lot of negative baggage to it,
Yeah.
because of the cross-Atlantic slavery, mass slavery by
Yeah.
the colonialists. So we don't want to use that
Of
term.
course.
Even in Arabic, the term "rik" is used.
Yeah.
R-I, if you want to
Yeah.
use it in English. So
Yeah.
I prefer the term prisoner of war or captives. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
even if the captive is even slapped, you have to free the slave, or free the
Mm.
prisoner of
Okay.
war. Use the term slave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
something that there's rights of even the prisoner of war. And back then they didn't have any
Yeah.
right. Most of the time they would be killed. Yeah, so they would
Yeah.
take no.
Decapitated. Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
they,
Yeah.
they take no captives. They would just kill
Yeah.
anyone and everyone, including the children, including the women, including whether
Mm.
they
Oh.
are combatants or non-combatants. But in
Even the
Islam,
cat.
All right.
there's a right even for the prisoner of war. You have to
Yeah.
feed them the same thing you eat. You have to clothe them with the same clothes you wear. Now,
Yeah.
this kind of
Yeah.
treatment of a prisoner of war was completely unheard of. Not
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
Islam, kind of streamline who should become the prisoner of war, or who should become your
Okay.
indentured, you can call it indentured servant. you know they
Yeah.
even paid the servant for the work they do. So not only that, you
Yeah.
pay them, but they could actually get their freedom by paying the
Uh-huh.
owner, the
Uh.
master. They can free
All right.
themselves. Okay, so if you look
Yep.
at for example, you must have heard of the Mamluks. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Mamluks was a dynasty, and they were
Uh-huh.
all basically prisoners of war. But they became
Oh.
so
Yeah.
powerful, and they bought their freedom and became so powerful that they became kings, ruling
Right.
over a Muslim empire. Yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
Mamluk kingdom.
Yeah.
Can you
Of course.
imagine
Yeah. Yeah.
any slave becoming a king? You know, this was a legal process for them to not only get the freedom, but also
Yeah.
to become kings. And furthermore,
Yeah.
Of course there was legitimate, sexual relationship between them as well, but it can never be
Uh-huh.
forced. Okay, only
Of
when there
course.
is mutual agreement
Uh-huh.
here, then they can actually do without up. They don't need to do a nikah like in a normal marriage, and there
Yes.
was no limit also in terms of the numbers. But the most
Uh,
important thing is it cannot be forced, because that would be something that is prohibited. It would become haram, because
yeah.
it's basically rape, isn't it? So at that
Okay.
time, because what we are doing is we are comparing the time 1400 years ago from today.
Mm-hmm.
Today nobody wants to become your slave. Yeah,
Of,
like even the prisoners of war today, they have rights today. Yeah, but
yeah.
back then,
Sure.
1400 years ago, they didn't have any rights. Like I said, they would basically be massacred. If the men were killed, these women would become like prostitutes. Nobody would care for them.
Uh,
They would, just like in
yeah.
Hindu tradition, they would
Mm-hmm.
actually go from door to door. The widows would prefer to
Mm-hmm.
burn themselves in the Hindu tradition, like in sati,
Uh,
rather than become a
yeah.
widow, because their value
Yeah.
was worthless. And the same thing back then. But
Yeah.
once they became even the prisoner of war of a Muslim, then they had rights, right to clothe
Of
them, to feed them. So if you slap them or if you hit them, then they should be, based on the rule, they should be freed. The other thing is there
free,
was
free to say.
constantly,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, the
Uh-huh.
Muslims constantly actually had the habit of freeing slaves if they did anything wrong.
Yeah.
For example, in Ramadan, you're not supposed to eat during the daytime, isn't it? Yeah.
Of
But if
course.
you
Yeah.
if you if you eat and you break your fast, that would be a sin. So one of the ways to expiate that sin is to free a
Free the
slave.
slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But any sin that you would commit, many of the times you would free a slave,
Mm-hmm.
which means that Islam was doing what it did was, in a practical way, it gradually weaned out this dependency on the prisoners of war or on the captives. You know
Yeah.
why?
Uh,
Because
yeah.
at that time they didn't have machinery like today, so everything was done um, by human effort, isn't it? So if you wanted to, example, grind your flour or your wheat or something to have flour, you would
Uh-huh.
use human effort, and it would be someone
Of
that you
course.
pay to do your work. Yeah. And
Yeah.
this is what it was mainly. It was mainly by man force. Everything was done. There were no machines back then. So before the industrial era,
Uh-huh.
slavery was so popular in Europe and America. Why? Because that was
Yeah.
basically the manpower determined your strength. The more slaves you have, the bigger the
Mm-hmm.
master you are, the bigger your house will
Beautiful
be.
point, brother.
Yeah. And this is something which,
Yeah.
back then, it was considered to be a norm to you employ humans to do your hard work.
Mm.
It's perfectly normal at that time. So you cannot, the entire economy will collapse if they
Yeah.
said, okay, from tonight all the slaves are free.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you
exactly.
know
Yeah.
Because,
so Islam is
and
practical.
one more. Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
it gradually, and it did wean out.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the
Mhm.
countries today, especially with the United Nations coming into force, and then many of
Mhm.
the countries became part of the United Nations. They signed treaties. They agreed that when we take prisoners of war, this is what we're going to treat them. But the thing is, Islam already before the Geneva Convention and all, the human rights of human beings and the human rights of the prisoners of war was already taken
Prisoners of
care
war.
of long before the Geneva Convention. It shows the mercy and the practicality of Islam at that time. The same thing with alcohol. Alcohol wasn't banned in single
Mhm.
night,
Yeah,
because
it came in different, of course, about time by time
gradually,
in yeah, ways. Yes, yes, yes.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
at first. The command came from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala
Uh,
that alcohol has some benefit in it, but the evil or the harm outweighs the benefit. So Allah
yeah,
revealed this ayah showing that the dislike of alcohol, because
yeah.
if you look at any person who is addicted to anything like alcohol or any intoxicant, even drugs, if you look at
Uh-huh.
how they rehabilitate them, they actually do
Mm-hmm.
not go cold turkey, which means cut off
Yeah.
all consumption of alcohol or the drug that they
Okay.
are used to. This will actually,
Yeah.
the body will cease.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be counterproductive and detrimental to the health of that individual if you cut it off completely. So what they
Of
do in a
course.
rehab
Yeah.
is they
Mm-hmm.
gradually wean them off. So, for example, if
Of.
they are taking, let's say, X amount, they will give them
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10% more every day, and gradually wean them off. This is how it works.
Yeah.
So similarly in Islam, like I said, initially the command from Allah came that the harm is higher than the benefit in alcohol. Then the second ayah later on comes that anyone who has consumed alcohol, they shouldn't go in prayer. Okay, that means they
Prayer.
shouldn't go to the masjid. Yeah. Then
Yeah.
finally, at the third stage, the hukum, the injunction from Allah came that alcohol is prohibited. It's haram.
Go ahead.
Okay, and this
Yeah.
is how, like I said, Islam is has practical solutions for everything. Because even back then, the reason a lot of people used to marry with have number of concubines and have multiple wives as well, because there were a lot of wars back then. What will happen to all those surplus women? Yes, who's going to marry them? Who's going to take care of them? Because
No,
back then the man was the
they'll
main protector and the
of
one
course.
the breadwinner for the wife, because the wives couldn't just go and work in the market. The situation wasn't like today. Yeah, you can go and have any jobs like today. It was much worse. It was
Yeah.
much harsh back then. So the question is, what solution did other religions have if they did not allow polygamy and so on? Yeah, if they did not allow concubines, then what solution did they have for these surplus women? So what we have to do is we
Yeah,
have to
they
take
don't have
Islam as
any.
a holistic package
Yeah.
rather than just try to understand it from a narrow-minded, or try to be try to judge it based on 1400 years ago.
Yeah, of course, and I guess regarding this slavery in Islam, like it was there were global slavery was there, of course, before Islam also,
Yeah.
and that's why
Use the term servant or indentured servant, or you can use, for example, captives of war, because like I said, the
captives
term
of war, I
slavery
guess.
loaded.
It sounds,
Loaded.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, that's why I guess the same theory goes to the captives of wars. Like step by step, they have given their
Yeah.
rights, and of course, like that is the best for them back then. That was the best for
Okay.
them
So
back then. What happened?
here is a reference which my friend Farid shared with me. Actually shared it
Yeah.
on Twitter. So can you read it? It says here, major Shafi scholar Al-Halim, who died in the year 403, this I believe is Al-Hijrah, said when commenting on Quran chapter 4, Surah An-Nisa verse 36, which speaks of kindness to slaves. If she disliked being touched or intercourse, then he shouldn't touch her or have intercourse with her without her permission. Okay, and the reference is given here, which is Al-Minhaj fi Shu'ab Al-Iman, 3/267. So yeah, I mean, like I said, there are a lot of Islamic scholars who talk about the rights of even the slave, even the one who is
Yeah.
under your authority, you being the master and they being your indentured servant. Yeah. Okay, Nihal bhai, thank you very much for your time. I think we have
Yeah, man. Alhamdulillah, I'll pray for you guys, brother, and Sam bhaiya. We are all, of course, we are missing you. Please, we hope you will come with the new channel.
Inshallah,
In
inshallah.
Hindi, इंशाल्लाह हमारा हमारा चैनल वापस आ जाएगा. इंशाल्लाह दुआ करते हैं. Thank you, Hashim brother,
no problem.
and thanks for your time. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair. Yeah. Salam.
Walaikum
Well,
salam.
mashallah, brother Hashim, you have explained it very well about
Yeah,
this.
alhamdulillah. If you want to share something, feel free, bro.
وإذا سألك عبادي عني فإني قريب أجيب دعوة الداعي إذا دعان فليستجيبوا لي وليؤمنوا بي لعلهم يرشدون